So I'm Markus Spiekermann, I'm from Fraunhofer, and also leading the project of the Eclipse Dataspace Components, EDC, and this is why I today have this short slot to show you how the EDC implements exactly this Dataspace Protocol. It's kind of an overview, and then we go into some technical details that you have an impression how the dataspace is used, but also how we really implemented that already in the code. So let me, first of all, for the very brief context, give you an overview about the EDC. So the EDC is an open source project which was started 2.5 years ago, so June 21. It is an Eclipse incubation project, so it is one of the projects in the Eclipse Foundation. We will hear some words about the EF from Micheal Plagge later on. It's licensed with the Apache 2 license, so everything is free to use, and everyone is invited to contribute and participate. There is a growing community already, so we have long-term committers which are involved in the project from the very beginning. We have active contributors. There's a list that you can see on GitHub. We already have 20+ adoption projects. So what does that mean? So the EDC is not a product in itself, it is a framework. It is a comprehensive framework of components, which I show on the next slide, which can be adopted by projects, which can be instantiated, and then more or less used in concrete dataspace implementations. Also in a KPI, so the ones that are involved in open source project maybe can derive from that that the project is really active here. So the technology, it is based on Java, and one of the most important aspects here also for this talk today is that it has a modular architecture. So it's extensible, and you can build different modules that could be integrated in the framework. It has other architecture principles, and also the current state, it's just for reference. So what are the components that are addressed in the EDC? And there are mandatory and very important ones. So these that are the ones maintained all the time that we are really put most of the efforts and priority in, which is the connector component on the one hand side, which also implements the dataspace protocol. We see that. There is a catalog component and also an identity hub, because to build a dataspace, these are the core 3 components that are required. There is also a dashboard and a registration service with, so you see that in gray. This is because they are more like components that are developed to have a showcase, a demonstrator available. So of course, if you want to show something and how to use the framework, you should also have a UI, and this is what, for example, the data dashboard enables. So let's go to the adoption and how the EDC implements the dataspace protocol. And you can see here where exactly in the communication of connectors the dataspace protocol happens. So you have the framework EDC, you have the interfaces, and you have the abstract classes that could be used to build your connector, but the connector is more. It's also bundles of extensions, for example. It's the concrete implementations of policies, all these kind of things. And of course you have communication outside of the dataspace protocol, and for that and also the data exchange itself. For that you have custom protocols. But the dataspace protocol, Anil, we couldn't see the slides, but I think you mentioned all the different message types. So this is where the communication with DSP is happening. So it's about the assets and it's about the policies. So more or less the negotiation phase and finding an agreement between participants. And what the EDC concretely does, so the dataspace protocol is a specification which also kind of is extensible, because we're talking about the API bindings. So to make it very concrete here, the EDC right now is implementing the HTTP or HTTPS bindings. It is implemented as an independent module, so you could also have modules that implement other protocols. Not yet available, but possible. It's implemented with minimal dependencies. So, for example, that there are no other big open source libraries or framework involved. Of course, we didn't write our own HTTP servers, so kind of dependencies are still used. Yeah, so you have registrations of different dispatchers, you have transformers, and you have JSON LD as our format, which is also used in the EDC management API. So there's a kind of match. And this is how the structure looked like. So from the perspective of the EDC and the Dataspace protocol, you more or less have three layers. On the bottom layer, you have the concrete interfaces of the EDC core, which are SPIs, service provider interfaces. So here you have abstract classes, constraints, interfaces, and all these, more or less classes that are required from the core itself. Then you also have the HTTPI cores, which is, for example, the web server implementation and the dependencies that we are using, and also interfaces that could be used for basic and common configuration. Yeah, and then on top, this is more or less specific to the DSP, and what you see here is the same for the catalog. It's just because for the slide. So you have exactly these three blocks also for the transfer process and the negotiation process. So there are always message receivers implemented. There are message senders implemented, and you have transformation of the different objects, for example, to use the JSON formats that was mentioned earlier. So this is more or less the high-level structure of the classes and interfaces that we have in the EDC connector component to implement the Dataspace protocol. For reference, and the ones that are more on the technical level and are interested to have a look in the code, these are the class names and folder structures, how the EDC, where you can find all the classes I was referencing. Yeah. So to sum it up, so what is the current status, so to say, from EDC implementing the DSP? So you have that bunch of messages that are specified within the protocol, and as said, every message is, of course, important. What you see here, you have all these messages, and X just means it is implemented. Yeah, so this is so what is right now missing is the suspension messages, and we have kind of limits right now with the contract offer message, for example. So you can have contract offer messages, but the communication itself is more or less done with a transfer request message or dataset request message. The one that is here in parentheses is more like if you have counter negotiations, and this is not implemented yet. This is the work in progress. So this is why I mentioned it here. Also, you see two more comments, which means no signatures yet. So this is because the EDC right now in the transfer is checking IDs, of course. There are different checks available, but there's no formal signature process yet. So this is something for future work and future milestones. But yeah, this is more or less the overview I wanted to give and show you that most of the messages and, of course, all the important ones are already implemented and could be used with the EDC framework and in adoption downstream projects that are using the framework. And with that overview, I would close my session and give, so to say, the screen to the next speaker. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Markus. That was a great overview to really shed some light on it. So I would invite Jesus for the next session.
Oh, yes, okay. So I expect everybody in the audience to know what FIWARE is, who we are, okay? And if you don't, you should, because it's one of the most important players in the space. But basically just saying that the FIWARE-related standards and open source components, because we are an organization dedicated to open source and also to using standards, enforcing standards, and also promoting standards. Well, we are for example, de facto standard in smart cities, in many smart environments, and they're being used in production in many, many places right now. And as I said, in smart cities, it's a de facto standard, okay? But this is expanding to other sectors like mobility, destinations, ports, water, because of the nature of the cities. Most of the activities happen in a city. So at the end, you have to connect all of them, okay? So smart cities and data spaces are linked together, and then being in a smart city environment means that you have to be able to participate in data spaces and vice versa, okay? Now, and this is the reason why we have a lot of experience on doing this. We have a lot of components, okay? We have enabled, for example, in the case of smart cities, to interconnect sensors, devices, applications, and so on. And then, based on this, we have evolved this to all the things that we had, we still have, of course, into the data space world. For us, this is, of course, connectors, enabling producers or providers of services or data services and also consumers. But we look at this from a holistic point of view. Okay, so there are many things that you have to do in order to really implement a real data space. Specifically, data spaces which are decentralized, because setting up a central entity for registering entities and so on, and then APIs or whatever, is easier than doing this how the European Union wants to do this, decentralized, peer-to-peer. This is not for the big companies, this is not for consortiums, this is for a decentralized peer-to-peer ecosystem where everybody can participate with the same value as any other, okay? And this is exactly the focus of our efforts. Now, and then you can see that apart from data space, you need a data space registry as decentralized as possible, and then in order to solve the value data chain, okay, the marketplace, publication platform, and so on. Now, you already saw in the first presentation the evolution of data space connector. This is not a black box, okay, has evolved. And then the concept has evolved to match the idea of a series of components which are integrated, and in the end they perform a function. And then, by the way, you can use all of them or just a set of the components that add value to you, okay? But in any case, you need a connector, which is not just one single box, to connect to the data space. And those components will be deployed and configured in control environments, okay, that you can control or as a service, and implement a number of services, okay? Now, for example, authentication, including the interface to the trust services and in the European Union for the trust framework of the European Union, okay? Authorization with policy enforcement, connection to the data exchange APIs, the actual transfer of data. You need also common data models, okay? We have a lot of things on this space because of the past experience. Resources for publication and metadata management, contract management, logging, auditing, remote attestation, whatever, okay? So the concept of the data space connector in IES RAM 4.0 has evolved in this, and we are following this. Now, but the point is that the DSBA, if you know about this, the data, okay, is very important. And then if we comply with this, and we are, you have to do some things. Okay? For example, the interface with the trust services should align with the EBSI specifications, okay, the European Service Infrastructure. For example, the DIF registry, the Trusted Issuer registry, but we have extended this to support authentication, access control. We are making the credentials a legal document because we are using EIDAS certificates, standard EIDAS and standard IDAS compliant digital signatures. So in a data space, when you need something which has legal relevance, then what we are making is the verified credential is a legal for onboarding, for signing contracts, for delegating powers, for doing e-mandates, for giving employees some authorization and some power to do something. This is a legal document as valid as handwritten signatures, for example, okay? Or PDF digital design. This is important. You want to comply specifically, for example, for highly regulated industries or data spaces like health, banking, but also when you have customers involved, for example, and then you need mandates and legally valid documents. So we go away with papers, verify credentials as legally valid documents, okay? Then authorization should implement an architecture and authentication and policy enforcement using ODRL, yes. IDSA Dataspace protocols are considered as relevant input, so we are including them, but as you can see in the diagram, that's not everything. We have many more things, okay? And then the first 2 points, as I said, they are required for ensuring compliance with the legal framework in the European Union. You have to do this, otherwise you are on your own, okay? And then compatibility with NGS-ILD as data exchange API is also included in the DSBA. It doesn't, you cannot support other protocols, of course, but this is one included in the DSBA technical conversions. Now, how to implement contract management, okay, is under development, okay, not just analysis, because we have a very complete set of product fulfillment APIs, which is implemented almost everywhere, which is called TM Forum APIs, and this is explicitly said in the DSBA technical convergence document. And this is something that we want to propose as a new basis, or as the basis for the new IDS protocol for ordering or product fulfillment. Okay. By the way, the current IDS contract negotiation protocol, we are testing and we are trying to change the name to policy negotiation, because it's at the beginning of everything. And then the actual procurement or fulfillment, okay, should be based for APIs, which is exactly what we are doing. We are integrating both, okay, in our implementation. But again, the names, there's some conflict in the names because of the purpose of the current IDS contract negotiation, okay. But we are in that. Now, well, that's what you have to do in order to be compliant. The SBA, and this is what we have. So we have something that was already announced or released on September of this year, and that's not everything again, because this is more complex than connectors. So we are doing more things. But what we have right now is aligned with the DSBA technical convergence recommendations. The context broker, we are using context broker for data exchange transfer. At the end, you can use other things, but this is already implementing the whole thing. And then the trust and identity and access management components, again, are implementing credentials protocol and, standards, and the SIOP version 2 and OpenID Connect SI protocol, presentation, OpenConnect for verifiable credential issuance, because, by the way, this is needed if you want to comply with the future EIDAS2 regulation, which is coming into force at the beginning of 2024. In the first quarter of 2024, we expect new EIDAS regulation to be enforced, then the countries will have a period of time for implementing this, and this implies that it will be compulsory for not just the public administrations of all the European Union countries, but also for most or many of the businesses in many industries, like in health, insurance, even tourism, and so on. They will have to accept, it's compulsory, identification using the European Union Digital Identity Wallet and the verifiable credentials using exactly this protocol. Have implemented already what is going to be the future for compulsory in the regulation. Okay? And you can use that, because we are not talking here about citizens, we are talking here about legal entities, businesses, and also employees or natural persons acting on behalf of legal entities. We have implemented not just the technical thing, but the full legal thing, okay? I know. So I'm going to, okay. So lowering the barriers, we are also designing everything to deploy this as we have SMEs. In the European Union, SMEs, we have to support them. This is very easy to deploy as a service, for example, for some companies that want to operate the business, okay? And then we have this also developed, okay? The DSC, Dataspace Connect as a service, together with ISST satellites, and then compliant, of course, with the GAIA-X compliance service, the registry service, and so on, and has been developed, this service, and is going to be offered to digital innovation hubs, okay, as a tool for coaching and helping SMEs. And finished, FIWARE has a good track record in moving from vision to execution. We are an execution entity, okay, organization, making things happen. We don't reinvent things. Whatever standards are available, we drive standards if we think they should be there. And then DSBA is important. DSBA is very important because this is where the critical organizations join, and then they agree on the common technical standards. Okay, and then DSBA brings all relevant organizations like EBDVF, FIWARE, GAIA-X, IDSA together, so we define together what should be done. Okay, and the FIWARE Foundation. Okay, just in case IDS thinks is important, because we have something very, very good, I think, is we offer to lead the incorporation of new IDS dataspace protocols we think are required in real data spaces. Authentication, authorization, product procurement, ordering, complex product procurement and ordering, standards based. And combining the FIWARE Context Broker technology and Dataspace Connector technology as a service, we are going to be able to support SMEs and small local governments. By the way, there are many, thousands. And by the way, collaboration in this space with FIWARE is for free. Anybody that thinks they have a component they can go there, we can collaborate, and we are open to collaboration with any other organization.
Thank you, Jesus. That was great. Great overview. And I assume that there are already a lot of parties interested in how to make the FIWARE and EDC and implement them together. So next in line. Yeah, okay. This is another wake-up call. I will be talking about FlexiGrobots project. And how the project tackles the matter with the interoperability. And so FlexiGrobots consortium is consisting of 16 partners, and the project will actually end in 2 months. And so it's about precision of agriculture operations by use of robotics, and also data sharing and mission control center that is connected to it. So in the big picture. So that was really a timing issue about the project, that we are now talking about the inter-dataspace interoperability and how FlexiGrobots platform would be able to communicate with the other platforms and other dataspace instances from agriculture and also from the other domains. So this is kind of a challenge that arises and that we have. And so currently, I'm frankly saying, the interoperability has been considered as at the API data and metadata level. So it was more about how the components that make the platform are talking to each other. But this should go beyond that. And there is also a lot of large rooms for improvement for that. And that was part of the project discussions about the portability and interoperability. And currently, so there are a lot of opportunities. So the project, as I said, is aiming to make better use of the robotics and drones in the agriculture operations. And so this data sharing, this data space could be also very interesting for the manufacturing domain, for the manufacturing companies that are making the robots, right? And or for the public administration data space that sets the area for agriculture, for farming, and all the other stuff. So as I said, so we have a limited time. We have like around 2 months to go, but we are now conducting a feasibility study to switch to use EDC and Dataspace Protocol And also make the project's results available as open source, I mean the Dataspace part of it at least, as part of Eclipse. So this is being discussed currently, but I would say that this is really a requirement for many projects for the sake of sustainability of the projects. Because in all the projects, like, we are having some outcomes, but then the sustainability plans might not be so clear. And so open source is a good way to go here. And so this is the current plan, and we are now in the negotiation phase to define the sustainability plan for the project, I would say. And I would invite Gonzalo for the next session. Thank you.
Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Gonzalo Gil. I came from Tekniker, that is a research and development center that is located in the north of Spain. In this presentation, I will talk about how we have actually adopted the IDSA reference architecture model and how we have implemented the Dataspace Protocol using the EDC with the goal of in the construction domain in a European project that is called Digichecks. So, well, here is just a wrap-up of the contents that I would like to talk about in this presentation. First of all, I would like to just present what is Digichecks, which is the goal of Digichecks. Then I will go through the architectural design of the data space that we are currently developing within the project, the Eclipse Dataspace components-based connector that we are using in order to ensure interoperable and trusted data sharing, how the Dataspace Protocol is actually implemented in this connector. As Anil has already said, this is not only talking about the technical interoperability layer, that is the data and control plane, but also we have to keep in mind that we have to share common terms. So we have to implement the information model that has been defined by IDSA. And finally, I will just point out now challenges now faced by IDS connectors in order to ensure trusted data sharing once interoperability has been somehow addressed. These are mainly how to move forwards to the self-sovereign identity approach to manage identities and how to face the challenge of ensuring data sovereignty through usage control technologies. So, well, when we talk about the construction domain, we have to keep in mind that nowadays all the permits that are required in order to construct a building are manually managed, and you have to check compliance with different laws. So this is like a process that takes a lot of time and has to be manually made. So the idea of this project is to create a digital framework in order to facilitate the management of those permits and those compliance checks. And in this case, we have used a data space based on reference initiatives like GaiaX and IDSA in order to ensure interoperable and trusted data sharing between all the participants that are involved in this process. So here you will see the architectural design of the Digichecks projects we are actually developing. We can see like two different layers. The first is more related to the governance of the ecosystem, more related to the GaiaX approach, and the second one is more related to actually how to ensure that data is being shared in an interoperable and trusted way. So here we can find components that have been defined in the IDSA reference architecture model. So in this case, the components in which we are actually working in the development phase are, on the one hand, the credential manager in order to abstract the participants from the complexity, the technical complexity that issuing verifiable credentials and having the certification process of GaiaX made. And then talking about IDSA, we are mainly focused on how to adopt existing IDS components like IDSC and how to integrate the vocabulary provider component in order to ensure interoperability in the domain, in the construction domain. So going a bit into detail into the EDC, which is the connector that we have actually implemented in this project, we have to keep in mind that Eclipse, as Markus said, what actually provides is a framework which you can configure different modules that you need for your use case in order to deploy any kind of connector. So what we have actually do in the project is we have used a deployable IDS connector that is actually provided by Sobity based on the Eclipse foundation components that enables you to follow the IDSA standards. So we have to know that Sobity nowadays provides 3 different kind of versions of the connector that you can actually use and deploy in your own infrastructure. In our case, we have used the community edition. It has mainly three advantages. First of all, it implements the HTTP protocol in order to implement the data transfer. Second, it integrates the dynamic attribute provisioning service in the communications so that you can manage trust between parts. And third of all, it includes a PostgreSQL database so that you can somehow store all the metadata that you have configured in your connector related to the assets, contracts, contract agreements, and so on. So based on this deployable IDS connector that Sobity provides, based on the Eclipse Dataspace components, what we actually provide in the project is a plug-and-play IDS connector so that any participant in the project can use it in a user-friendly way, can provide their asset, can search for assets for different participants, negotiate them, and then initiate the data transfer. So talking about how the Dataspace Protocol is actually implemented in the EDC, as Markus has already said, the EDC well divides the control and data plane. So the EDC use the control plane to search for different assets from different participants, to negotiate these assets, and to establish the contract agreements. Then, once these agreements has been defined, the data transfer plane is responsible for the transfers based on an HTTP protocol. So here we keep in mind of the agreements that have been already defined in the control plane. And as I already said in the first part of the presentation, we do not have to forget about the semantic interoperability layer. In this regard, the IDSA already defines the information model that we have to follow in order to use the same terms in the communications. This model it's represented in different layers. We can find in the conceptual representation, in the IDSA reference architecture model. We can find the declarative representation through an ontology that is actually available. And we have also a Java library that you can use in your own software in order to implement in an easy way the information model and ensure that that the communications are made in an interoperable way. So once we have seen how interoperability is addressed, not only from the technical interoperability point of view, but also from the semantic interoperability point of view, what are the new challenges now faced by IDS connectors, mainly to ensure the other pillar of IDSA, how to ensure trusted data sharing? First of all, we have to move forward the sales-oriented approach for trust management. So before going into detail in this approach, the first main challenges is to align different certification criteria that are nowadays in order to certify participants and the technical components responsible for data sharing, that is the IDS connectors. And then talking about the sales-oriented approach, is not only about to implement it in the connectors, but also we have to adapt the dynamic attribute provisioning service so that it can provide verifiable credentials to ensure trusted data sharing. And we have also to do not forget about the verifiable data registry, which will be responsible to storage all these identities, all these entities that are responsible for issuing verifiable credential or for managing the dynamic attribute provisioning services that will be in a data space. And finally, other key element in order to ensure trusted data sharing is usage control. nowadays, the EDC, what actually implements in the connector, it's what I call the present usage control, so that the agreements are enforced at data access, not only the data consumer side, but also in the data provider side. And what we have to move forward is to enforce policy also every time data is being used in the data consumer side, what is called the concept of decision continuity. And well, just to finish, usage control is a field in which I have been deeply involved in these last years in my personal PhD. So we have been working in Tekniker in something that I think that is interesting, that is how to identify all the features that are needed in order to implement usage control from the policy implementation phase to the policy enforcement phase. For example, when I'm talking about policy implementation, I'm talking about policy quality, policy transformation, and some other features that are nowadays forget. And when I'm talking about policy enforcement, I'm talking, for example, as I have already said, about decision continuity. And the other contribution that we have made in Tekniker was more related to the feature I have already said about the policy quality. This is something important because we have to keep in mind that this connector has to be deployed to be used by users without the knowledge of the technology. So policies are too complex, assets are too complex, and the policies that you define in the assets may lead to conflicts that may result in security breaches and performance issues that are of utmost importance in this kind of solutions, of usage control solutions, in order to ensure that data sovereignty is granted in all the data lifecycle. And that's all.
Thank you, Gonzalo. That was highly inspirational for all the projects that are really following this similar path. So, Jordi, please.
Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, congratulations on Gonzalo on your recent PhD, because I saw it was this year. So, welcome to the club. How do we pass the slides? Okay, so I'm going to probably bring a different perspective here, because it's not that we are developing anything or doing anything exactly with the connectors, but we're the consumers. Okay, in DATAMITE, what we're trying to do is to build a technological stack that can be used by any company. I mean, this is, as long as you have data, I can help you, basically. Because there's you know that basically most companies or many companies have tons of data, but they have a poor management of the data. So we're working on the process of giving them tools on governance, on quality, on security, and even sovereignty, and finally also enabling them to share the data to the outside, to wherever the outside is. So basically, it's assisting in the process of getting your data, that can be bad quality data, and end up in a data product that you can share somewhere, wherever you want to share it, and get some, I'm basically assisting in your monetization. This is actually not exactly true, because monetization shouldn't be only, and I always repeat this, Ilknur knows it, but it's not only selling your data. I mean, monetization is also the process that you can go through with governance, quality, improve your data so you can take a better advantage of your data. Because if you get more money from your data in your company, that's monetization as well. So this is in a very high level what we're doing, basically creating a modular framework that assists companies on improving or enriching the quality or the way they manage their data. But as I say, we're going to share it as well, or that's the purpose. So what we're going to be doing is easing the way companies share or publish data in many places. Because at the end of the day, the goal, as I was saying, is to have this modular framework. You have it in your organization, and then through different plugins, you can connect to different environments where you can share the data and do whatever you want to do. I mean, it can be selling it, it can be sharing it, it can be exchanging it, it can be collaborating with someone else, I don't care who. Okay, so in principle, we are talking about IDS data spaces, that's our main target. Gaia X should come handy, because in principle, they are friends. And we're also talking about EOSC and the AI on-demand platform as things that are already there. We're also considering marketplaces. Marketplaces should be something easy where you, hopefully, you only have to deal with semantic interoperability, and that should be it, to adapt yourself to whatever is the metadata model, and you can just publish your data set in there and have it in the web page or whatever it is. But focusing on the IDS data spaces or GaiaX, our goal is to use EDC as the IDS connector that we are going to be integrating in the pile, in our technological stack. So, guys, do your work, okay, please? And because there are several things that we have to face when we think on our DATAMITE sharing module, because it's just a module, it's just a part of the schema, and we want to share to all these places. I mean, we have to deal with semantic interoperability, because basically we have to be enforcing the use of, we have to be easing the adoption of whatever vocabulary is being used in the particular data space, so the company can tag or enrich their data set properly. We have to be sure that we have technical compatibility. Hello, Dataspace Protocol. Okay. And we also have to deal with organizational and legal barriers, formal governance quality. But just focusing, I'm trying to be brief, but these are the two aspects that are of the most concern for us. I mean, here's where the Dataspace Protocol comes into play. I mean, what we cannot not accept would be too strong, but something we think is a problem. I mean, basically we're trying to provide something that can be used to by any company, or something that can be used by any DIH, because DIHs are very important for us. DIHs, well, I don't know who of you can raise your hands, who's familiar with DIHs? Okay, that's decent enough, not too many. Well, basically DIHs, one of their missions is assisting companies in their ecosystem to leverage or get familiar with some technologies. And one of the things we should be doing, for instance, in ITI, which is where I come from, is assisting our ecosystem. So the organizations are not going to be the ones deploying DATAMITE, for instance, but it could be ITI, and our companies in our, not our companies, the companies in our ecosystem will be leveraging our stack to share data to whatever it is. So at the end of the day, companies or DIHs need something that is easy. So it's not acceptable that I deploy EDC and then it doesn't work. So please, give us this technical compatibility, and then we will deal with the ISST policies and so on, okay? But yes, as I said, just bringing up the relevance and the importance of efforts like the Dataspace Protocol for those of us who are gonna use it. Thank you very much.
So now the final chapter. We will start with my dear colleague Ilknur Chulani here.
Thank you, Anil. So first of all, thank you for being with us here in this room and also online. And apologies for all the connectivity issues. Thank you for your patience. So today, we try to present you an overall view about the Dataspace Protocol. I don't have the... So first, we talked about the Dataspace Protocol specification itself, which is on its way to becoming an international standard, just like the internet protocols Anil mentioned earlier. Then we saw that it's being adopted by the open source communities. So you saw examples from the Eclipse Foundation and the FIWARE Foundation. We even talked about Soveti, a commercial company providing a community edition, for example. So there are many others. The IDSA data connector report, you can find them all. And then what we are excited is that we are starting to see some research projects also looking at the Dataspace Protocol as a way to address and further explore the interoperability challenges. But we are seeing that, for example, the 2 projects mentioned here, but there are many more. So we know at least Omega X, Tango, even Da Capo is starting to study the Dataspace Protocol, trying to see how they can implement it. And there are also other projects. And everybody's trying to see what everybody else is doing, how can we collaborate. So maybe it's a good time to stop and reflect for a moment. Where do we go from here? How do we progress? How do we move forward? So, do we invent a wheel each in our isolated corners? So we build something specific for each project and forget about it at the end of the project? Or do we join our forces to create something more sustainable and more impactful? So at IDSA, we propose the second option. So let's work together, you are not alone. Let's try to create something beautiful. Let's try to harmonize our efforts. But how do we do that? So how do we get ourselves organized? So at IDSA, together with our members, we focus on defining the data space concepts, creating the high-level specifications, the reference architecture model. Ah, okay, sorry. Okay, is it better now? Okay, so at IDSA, we focus on these specifications, the high-level specifications, the adoption, the support for standardization. On the other hand, when it comes to implementing these data space concepts, we believe the best place is the open source communities. This is where the software can be developed, the more detailed technical specifications can be defined, even also support for standardization can be provided. So we talked about FIWARE and Eclipse earlier. At least in the case of Eclipse, now there is a new initiative starting, and I wanted to mention it today, now that we are talking about the Dataspace Protocol. So we are very excited about this initiative, which will be an umbrella program in the Eclipse Foundation for gathering all the projects related to data spaces. So this will help promote also the projects on data spaces. It will also help us as a forum for gathering individuals interested in the data space technology. So EDC, for example, a connector or components project can be part of it, but the possibilities are endless. So you could have also under this umbrella, you could have other open source projects, for example, for implementing data planes for different data sources, or for creating different components, not just connectors. For example, tools for data space governance authorities, or even test compatibility kits. So this can be a nice gathering place for people alike who want to contribute and who want to do something great with data spaces. So one example, for example, that comes to our mind, imagine all the projects, research projects working on the energy sector, gathering together and creating an open source project for creating data planes specific to the energy sector. Wouldn't that be so cool? So when the projects finish, you have something very substantial and it lasts the project life cycle. So we are lucky today because we have some colleagues from the Eclipse Foundation. So Micheal Plagge will be joining us remote in a few minutes. And also we have his colleague David Ramon in the audience with us. So please feel free also to talk to him afterwards. So Micheal will tell us how you can be part of this working group, or even if you are not part of the working group, how you can contribute to the open source projects in Eclipse for different data space related initiatives. And we are also here to help, to support as IDSA, to help bridge with the open source community. So please come join us, start thinking maybe how we can contribute, how we can do things together. So thank you very much. I think we can switch now to Micheal. Thank you.
At the Eclipse Foundation, we define ourselves via the 5 core services we offer to our community. On the one side, we provide the infrastructure for the open collaboration, and we'll tell a little bit later on this one. We support the communities with ecosystem development by hosting events. We had just last week our EclipseCon in Ludwigsburg with a couple of 100 developers We provide the community governance and processes, starting from IP and antitrust policy via a code of conduct and similar things. IP management and licensing, so we can make sure that the open source projects have all the needed IP information, that all the chosen open source licenses are compatible with each other and other thing. And we also started to take care about supply chain security. If I talk later on about Eclipse Dataspace components and the working group, one of the expressed goals is to develop more production-ready code. And production-ready code for sure needs to be secure. And so how to, in the projects, enable security, supply chain security, that's what we also do. On top of this, our communities then build open source software common platforms. And I think that's usually due to time to market and scale. But we can completely accept that on top of this, there needs to be a value line and then also an area where companies and organizations can compete. Because at the end of the day, at least in our community, organizations don't work together to do something. They work together to earn money at the end of the day, which is usually the purpose of organizations and companies. One of the interesting things is how do we scale? We talk today mainly about the Eclipse Dataspace components and now the working group. But if you look at this, and I steal that slide from one of my presentations I gave to the automotive industry, there's a lot of more happening at the Eclipse Foundation right now. So we onboarded the Gaia X Federation services. We are home to the Eclipse Structures X project, which is the implementation project of Catena X. We are currently in discussion around hosting project around manufacturing X. We're hosting the project around the asset administration shell. And all of these things are connected and directly related to data spaces. And the big benefit of having all of these projects under one governance at the Eclipse Foundation is that whenever you start at one end of this chain, maybe with SDV, software defined vehicle, or EDC, you can easily transfer your knowledge and all the experience around governance and similar to all other projects at the Eclipse Foundation. So all the projects and everything we are doing is governed by one governance at the Eclipse Foundation. So if you're familiar with the governance in one project, you can easily start to work on other projects without any additional discussion and learning curve when it comes to governance and processes. Really important to understand is at the Eclipse Foundation, the differences between projects and working groups. It's stated that we're currently on the phase of implementing an Eclipse Dataspace working group. But let me now first initially talk about the projects, and maybe remember this presentation of Markus Spiekermann. He talked about the Eclipse Dataspace components, the Eclipse Dataspace components and projects. And projects at the Eclipse Foundations are driven by a group of individuals. So there's usually no notion of an organization or a company in projects. And projects are there to build code, APIs, documentation. They are governed by a concept we call meritocracy. That means that the most active people in a project should have the most influence in a project. Projects usually don't have budgets. Projects usually don't come with costs. But sponsoring is possible for projects, and projects are accessible to everyone. You do not have to be a member of the Eclipse Foundation to start a project or to contribute to a project or to work on a project. For sure, it helps us as a nonprofit organization to have members to find at the end of their finance infrastructure and other things, but there's no need to become a member of the Eclipse Foundation to work on projects. So if you would like to decide with your organization to work on the Eclipse Dataspace components tomorrow, you just would need to sign 1 or 2 legal documents about the contribution, but there's no need for membership. That's slightly different for working groups. Working groups at the Eclipse Foundation are usually a group of organizations, companies, research organizations. They focus, promote, and augment Eclipse technologies with an open governance, and they come usually with a fees and budget, and I will explain in the next slide a little bit about this one. And the relation between projects and working groups is that projects and working groups are associated with each other, but that's not one way. So a project could be associated to different working groups, and for sure working groups are usually associated with different projects. The main purpose of working groups are vendor neutral governance. Just to give you an example, usually Eclipse Foundation owns all the trademarks, like, for example, names of working groups and similar, because as I said before, we try to force a neutral environment. And if one of the parties to the table would own the trademarks, this party would have much more influence on what's happening than any other party. So we try to avoid these kind of situations for our communities. We do ecosystem development and marketing, especially on the coding side. If you look at the existing initiatives like IDSA and others, you see that they quite often focus on the adoption of their technology, which is completely fine. But at the same time, we think it's important also to promote the developers in an ecosystem, right? So it's great to have a technology, but this technology doesn't grow out of the sudden or something. There usually are people behind that one, organizations behind that one, and building that ecosystem of actively contributing organizations to an open source project. That's what the working group can support. Branding on compatibility. So the working group is there also to maybe do some branding stuff. We just have another working group which is introducing a mature badging program. That means projects in a certain maturity level will receive a badge. It means ready for production or just started, let's say, in an incubation project, so that people would like to use the project have a clear idea in which level, on what quality level a project or software is. That helps adoption and helps drive usage of projects. Maybe the most important for the Eclipse Dataspace working group is specification development. Specification is a different story than open source code, especially when it comes to IP. So we help in the working group to communities to develop specifications. Just to be very precise, and Ilknur mentioned this already, we do specifications for source code. Specification at the Eclipse Foundation always means a document which describes the specification and at least one compatible implementation. So we can only specify things at the Eclipse Foundation which are implementable. That means any kind of other specification, like specification for operations or other things, these are usually not the right place for the Eclipse Foundation. Maybe as a final comment, the Eclipse Foundation is an ISO pass, JTC1 pass submitter. That means the Eclipse Foundation has the right to propose specifications which has been developed at the Eclipse Foundation to be transposed in an official ISO standard. And finally, task of the working group, usually technology, consists of different projects at the Eclipse Foundation. And the task of the working group is to do a cross-project alignment on features, on time, and similar things. Coming to the Eclipse Dataspace working group, so we will have the first meeting of the steering committee. It's currently scheduled for next Friday. So we're really, you see the live burst of that working group. The mission of the Eclipse Dataspace working group is to provide a forum for individuals and organizations to build and promote open source software specifications and open collaboration models needed to create scalable, modular, extensible, industry-ready open source components based on open standards and for databases. And that's not something I just wrote down for this presentation, but this is part of the working group charter. I will have a slide with a link to that later on, which defines how the working group will operate. This is also from the working group charter. So the working group plans to focus on 3 different areas: core and protocols, data planes and components, and authority and management. If you would be interested to the detail, there are people like Markus Spiekermann who can much better talk on the content, what the working group will do, or you just look into the charter. These are important resources, and maybe if we share the slides afterwards, you could have used that link to learn about the working group, the draft charter, the working group participation agreement. This would be the document you would need to sign to become a member of the working group. The working group process and working group operations, this is our description how working groups are operating and the regulations and governance for the working groups. Maybe a final word on research and open source. We clearly think that open source and research is a quite interesting combination, because we see that, as you can see from the picture, I don't want to go into the details, that there's a win-win-win situation between researchers, software vendors, and the industry to collaborate in open source software. Prototypes usually could come from the researchers, and the software vendors can drive industrialization, and there would be requirements from the industry. And if everything works together in an open, neutral, well-defined environment, this can really help to stimulate innovations. And at the Eclipse Foundation, we have, I think we are active about 20 to 25 research projects as of today. If you're interested, and DATAMITE is just one of these research projects. So if you're interested to get a little bit more insight, there's a website on this one, eclipse.org/research. So whenever you have time, 5 minutes, just have a look at it. And yeah, that's it from my side. If you have any questions, feel free to ask or reach out to me. And I would hand over back to Ilknur.
Thank you very much, Micheal. That was really exciting, and we are all looking forward to this Dataspaces working group. And thank you very much, everyone, for your patience for this session. And also a big thanks to my dear colleagues in Ilknur Chulani and Silvia Castelli, who tremendously helped in organizing this session. So unfortunately, we won't be able to host the Q&A session here, but you can always feel free to reach us via LinkedIn, email, fax, I don't know. So all the measures. And we can also catch up here outside the room, as we have another session here starting at 11:30. And Ilknur, you have a final thing?
Yes, maybe just a few final words. Dataspace Protocol. So please tell us how we can help, how we can support you. So in some previous interactions with some of you, we got some good ideas. For example, maybe a webinar series on some of the topics here, more in-depth sessions, because today was very short. Or maybe a follow-up meeting, one of our colleagues suggested us with the research projects working on this. So if you have some great ideas like that, please share with us, with Anil or myself or other IDSA colleagues. We really want to help you implement this protocol. And also, again, I want to repeat my invitation. Please start thinking about, at least make a space in your mind for the open source projects. And not just in Eclipse, but in FIWARE, in other communities. That can really be a good way to sustain our results from our research projects. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.